thank you for speaking thank you for actually modelling the tone of this conference in the way that you spoke so far. So we appreciate that. But I'm going to ask some banal questions to start with. So first of all, this was one that was asked of me to ask of you. I know that your name, I did my research, your name is Irish, but how, give us a bit of an idea behind Carney.
It's kind of a funny story on a number of levels. I can laugh at it now. I used to find it a bit embarrassing. Funnily enough, my father's side of the family is Irish, so it does logically fit. But my siblings are Jonathan, Catherine and Timothy, so it doesn't fit at the same time. My mum was somewhere at a lunchroom or a uni, I can't remember exactly what the story was, but wherever she was, someone she was with their dog had just had puppies and they were looking for names for the puppies and were reading through lists of names from the name book. This is the embarrassing bit. Anyway, the list was read out and one of the names on the list was Carney. And my mum, as she tells the story, said, "Oh, that's a really nice name. I love that name. I'm going to have a daughter called Carney." My father wasn't very convinced. He thought she was making it up, thought, "Oh, that's not a real name." This is a bit I'm not quite sure about because somehow he said to her, "If you can show me it in a name book, I'll agree with you." Now, she found it in a name book, but it's actually if you can find it in a name book, you'll find it in the boys section.
I did.
Yes, right. There you go. So the bit I'm not sure about is how that convinced him that he should have a daughter called Carney. Anyway, here I am. The other bit that's funny about it though is when I decided that I would join the army late in year 12. It was only then. I had heard it before, but it had slipped my mind in the whole sort of recruiting process. It was only late, like right towards the end, that my mum actually reminded me. The meaning of the name it actually means brave soldier, which was such a spin out when I was in year 12, having suddenly decided I was going to join the army for not a really any good reason, but that was just a kind of little twist to it.
Okay, no, that's a helpful twist for us to know. What book is sitting on your bedside table that you're reading at the moment?
Well, I actually just finished a book that I've been reading for months, last night or the night before. I love reading, but I'm a really slow reader, and I tend to only read when I get into bed at night. I don't have a lot of time to fall asleep. A couple of pages. So I have just finished reading a book by John Marsden, who's one of the authors that Andrew mentioned, all about raising children and schools and things. I constantly have this struggle between wanting to just read some light, trashy fiction or even not so light and trashy, but just something fiction, easy to read. And so I've got a couple of fiction books that have been sitting on my bedside table for ages. And then I just get drawn to these fiction books that are harder work and they're often about parenting. And in fact, it's been on my mind for the last sort of 24 or 48 hours to buy a book by David Gillespie about the digital addiction and teenage brains, because I can't stay away from those books, even though I want to read fiction books at the same time. So
maybe saved for holidays or manoeuvres or something. Okay. Now, with your job, for those of us who are civilians, can you just walk us through this ranking system? Because I've got a feeling that you're pretty high up in this. So do we have a slide?
No. We do have a slide. Funnily enough, and I did have it in my talk and I took it out, there's actually more ranks above me still than there are below me, which is a little bit disheartening. But,
okay.
So this is all three services. This row in the middle is Army officers, and that's where I sit. We actually don't have that rank. So really there's only 3 ranks below me, and then there's all these ones above. Although, in my defence, there's only ever one. There's either none, 0 or 1 of this rank, and that's that? So this is the Chief of the Defence Force. So if the Chief of the Defence Force is in the Army, then we have one of those ranks. If the Chief of the Defence Force is not from the Army, then we have no one at that rank, and that's a full general. And when you get to about here, it sort of starts to taper off quite rapidly. So this is all the general ranks here. And then I guess the other interesting thing to note is that, so Air Force, Army, Navy at the top, And then below here, you have the same again. The rank structure in the army, there's kind of two rank structures. And the easiest way to kind of liken it to, it's a little bit like a blue collar, white collar kind of distinction. So these are the soldier ranks, or the sailors, or the airmen, depending on which service you're in, and then these are the officers sort of up above. So if you're an officer, you're always in a leadership position, even if you sort of don't necessarily have people working directly for you. If you're a soldier, you kind of work your way up into leadership positions, but technically you're still always subordinate to the most junior officers, even though you may have a lot more experience. Okay. I won't go through all the names of the ranks, but if anyone's particularly interested, we can have a look at it a bit more later. You can actually Google that. Just Google Australian Defence Force ranks and that exact picture will come up.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah,
does that
does
clear things up a bit?
What's the at the bottom?
For us, at the bottom is the most junior rank is private, and in the but I like the Navy and the Air Force. Whereas if you're at the bottom in the Navy, you're a seaman, yes. And if you're at the bottom in the Air Force, you're an airman or an airwoman.
Okay.
Like you kind of
a little bit more hidden.
Yeah.
Private.
Private. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With your job, what gets you up in the morning and out of bed? Like you talked a lot about the temptation to wear the mask. But what excites you about being in what you're doing?
My husband would sit here and say, "That's the wrong question to ask."
It's not.
Look, I've had moments where I've loved my job. I'm not one of those people that, I love my job. I wouldn't get out of bed and go to work if I didn't. If I'd stop loving it, I'll do something else. And there's plenty of people around me that say that every day. I like to think I'm a realist, not a pessimist, but I'm sure there's a bit of pessimism in there as well. I find work hard. I grew up with my dad always saying, once we got to the age of getting jobs and we'd start whinging about, whatever after school job we had, well, that's why they pay you for it. That's why it's work. You know, if it was fun, they wouldn't have to pay you. I don't know whether that subconsciously, impacted me. I do enjoy being challenged by my job. Maybe I enjoy it a bit more in retrospectively when I look back and think, oh, look at all those things I achieved this year. So having said that, I think, particularly in the last few years, I sort of alluded to, we had a bit of a turning point in our family. My husband and I did a role reversal. I went back to full-time work. He went to part-time work, stay home with the kids. He's now gone into ministry. And it was, there were a number of things that we sort of thought and prayed about at the time. And one of the things was, at the time my husband was working for World Vision, which is a large Christian organisation. He was one Christian male among many in the organisation. And while, as we saw on that picture, I'm not actually that senior, there aren't really, firstly, there aren't that many women. We're still very heavily outnumbered in the Defence Force. And then naturally, as you progress through the ranks, there are fewer and fewer Christian women in the military. So one of the things that we talked about and prayed about when we made this decision was about the different position I was in was that I had the opportunity to be an increasingly senior Christian woman, which was unique in some sense, whereas that was different to him when we were trying to work out how to decide. And it would seem over the years since then that as God has continued to open doors that would indicate that was that has still been the decision He wanted us to make. And so I am very conscious when I think about my job and what takes me to work each day about the opportunity I have to kind of be a role model and encourage younger women in the organisation in general, but particularly younger Christian women. So I try and think a little bit about that, and that certainly is an important part of what keeps me going to work each day.
What was ironic, I think, as we were listening to you, was even though the army is a very, very different world for many of us, the things that you kept talking about were probably things that we all face as Christians in our workplaces. So there's a lot of translating there that's helpful. One of the things you said was masks aren't always bad. You know, you talked about that in the army, that, it actually helps people to know where they fit, that it also deals with that individuality which can sometimes get in the way. So I was really curious about that. Has it been true for you? Like, how has the mask that you've had to put on as part of the army helped you to understand more than just, you're you?
Yeah. It's interesting because linked into that, I was just flipping through the aeroplane magazine in the back of the seat pocket on my way here this afternoon. And there was a little snippet, young upcoming podcast makers talk about happiness. It was some weird thing with these 3 little sections, and I was reading through one of them, just flicking through it, and there was a line in there about, and I actually took a photo of it. I don't have my phone with me to read it out, but it was something about completely about just doing what you feel like doing what feels right, going out there. And I think, I think this is maybe more true in the military, but I don't think it's only applicable in the military. I think there are plenty of times where if I'd done what I just felt like, if I'd truly acted the way I felt, I would have stood up in a bunch of soldiers and who needed leadership and guidance, and I would have just gone, I don't really know what I'm doing, I don't know what to say, I don't want to be here, I'm just going to go and have a coffee. It's not a good Christian witness, obviously, but it's not what I'm being paid for. It's not what they need from me. It's not what the organisation needs. Like, we are in the workforce to do a job. Yeah. So I think, I don't like that idea about just do what feels right for a whole number of reasons, and that could be another whole conference topic, I'm sure, on its own. So, I won't sort of pursue that. But I think it is part of, like, sometimes you actually just have to put the mask on. You have to pretend that you know what you're doing and just get on and do the job.
Almost for the sake of serving.
For the sake, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, and that's certainly been my experience, and certainly there's been numerous examples where I've had to do that and been able to recognise that it is for the good of the organisation, and I think I grow in those moments as well.
Yeah. Okay. Can you think back to a time where you think,
I can't.
well,
I
you'd have
I
to
can't
kill
think of
me?
specifics. No. Sadly, my job's not that interesting. I sort of shared about it, and it's a much longer story about the time, when I had this terrible boss, and it was a really difficult year. So that was certainly,
culture.
So that was certainly a time. There's not any one particular time, but over that period of time of building these relationships with these soldiers who worked for me, and part of that was the nature of the role that I had at that time.
Yeah.
But when I was reflecting on that question, I actually had, I have moments where I see other people do things and I think, oh man, that's what I should have had the courage to do. And that would have been, a perfect example. I had 2 years ago, I was studying. I had I guess you could think of it as a bit of a sabbatical. We do a mid-career year of study where you do a bunch of military subjects and a master's program through our ANU, and you do it with a bunch of your peers. So there's 160, sort of mid-level officers doing this course, and in various subjects you're put into syndicate groups and discussion groups, and of course with all our technology-aided study these days, there's chat groups and things, and so you're sitting in a room like this and everyone's got their devices out and chatting and mocking and having a dig at the person who's speaking, and it's, we all sit there saying, gosh, I'm never coming back to speak to this group because you know exactly what goes on the other side. Anyway, this was going on in a group I was in, and I'd been in this group and I'd sort of come in as an outsider because my group had been dissolved, and all these classic things that we should be able to overcome as Andrew was talking about, we should have the strength knowing that those things don't matter. But I sort of sat in the background, and these group were just, they were already very familiar with each other and very, it was just bawdy kind of humour and disrespecting and a whole range of other things. And it carried on, for ages anyway. We had another girl came in for the day or a couple of days, not a Christian. She sat there after a few hours at one stage when it was just us in the room, some of the staff had left, and she just turned around and she said, right, like she just got really angry and just pulled everyone into line and said, right, this is just terrible the way that you're carrying on and you're making fun of these people and you're disrespecting these people. And it was just, I just was so convicted that was exactly what I should have done.
Yeah.
Like that is when I should have, taken off that mask and not cared what people thought about me and stood up for these people and been, and been honest. And, and the reaction in the group was one of, actually, you're right, we've all let ourselves into this poor behaviour and that's completely true and right and we shouldn't have done it. And, it was just a good reminder that, I should have been the one to do that.
Yeah, but you can learn from that, can't you, when you see that happen?
Absolutely.
And have a go next time around. All right, just a couple of quick questions just to finish with. Can you tell us some of the places that you've been to, or are they all under wraps?
I can. So I haven't actually been anywhere particularly interesting lately. I spent a couple of weeks in Hawaii last year. Sounds glamorous.
That's very interesting.
I sat in a shed with no windows on the side of a runway for 2 weeks with a portaloo outside. I did get to visit a beach on the last day. I was involved in some preparatory work for in Papua New Guinea on Manus Island a number of years ago. I went into the Solomon Islands fairly early on in 2003, I think that's right, just after the initial kind of conflict there. I was in the second rotation going in there. I've spent 6 months in the Green Zone in Baghdad, embedded in a multinational headquarters, working in the logistics section there. When was that? That was 2005, I think. So it has been a while since I've been anywhere interesting, but I've been to. They're my sort of three main overseas deployments.
Have you had to juggle any of these deployments with the kids now?
No, I've actually been very fortunate. I did have to turn down a few in those years when kids were really young or when I was pregnant. And it is one of those things that interestingly, things have slowed down. We don't have as many people overseas as we did sort of at the height. But I do think that it is something that will probably be a question we need to consider in the next couple of years. It will probably become a reality for us. But no, I've been very grateful that I haven't been in a position where I haven't had the choice to say no since the kids have come along.
Okay, all right. Well, look, we really do want to thank you for coming, flying from Canberra to Melbourne to here tonight to be with us. Thank you for opening up this topic for us. It's got all of us thinking about our own work situations, our own places where it's easy to be masked. I think that whole thing of the organisation mask engendering conformity, that really stuck with me and made me think about culture and whether the cultures, what am I countercultural as a Christian? So I really appreciate that encouragement to think about that. And having someone who holds you accountable, as you said, who do we have who keeps us accountable for the way that we're doing our jobs, to have those people in our lives. In your case, your husband, but for the rest of us, we've got to think about that. So thanks for that tonight. And you'll hear from Carney again tomorrow when we have Q&A. And we're going to have a break now. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. Can I just... I just want to put a little disclaimer out there. I'm conscious that I probably made the army sound like a terrible place to work. It's actually not that bad. If you know people who want to join, I have had a good career. So I just wanted to temper what I said with that little disclaimer.
Thank you.